And Councilmember Suggs?
Here.
Manager West?
Present.
Attorney Bloor?
I'm here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I just also want to note, if you can hear it, we can. I think it's the heating system behind us. I don't think the microphones are picking it up, but it's a little distracting. So, all right, if you can please stand as you are able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Are there any late items from staff?
Mayor and Council, no late items this evening.
All right. Any late items from council? Okay, it doesn't sound like it. That brings us to public comment. I just want to, feels a little like feedback, but I don't think it is. I just wanted to mention, because we got quite a few emails this morning about the free, prior, and informed consent issue that people are concerned about. That is on the comprehensive plan discussion, and we are not talking about the comprehensive plan on tonight's agenda. So you are welcome to speak to it, but it will be at the second public comment period. First public comment period is for items on tonight's agenda. So if you don't want, if that's where you're here and you don't want to stay, you're welcome to stay. But if you don't want to, we'd be happy to see you at our next meeting. And you can obviously stay and speak at the second public comment period as well. And that goes for people online as well. So we do have some hands online, but we will start with council chambers. And I have one person signed up so far, and that is Steve Luxton. And while Steve's making his way up, since I see some new faces, if you are speaking at the first public comment period, please state your name, whether or not you're a resident, and you have 3 minutes. Go ahead, Steve.
Hello, I'm Stephen Luxton. I'm a resident of the city of Port Angeles. I just wanted to briefly thank the council for the vote on the sidewalk fee in lieu and the staff on their work on that. I think we ended up getting to a great compromise that is going to unlock a lot of potential in subdivisions and in infill going forward. Tonight, I just wanted to speak briefly on H1, resolution to amend the master fee schedule. And I'm going to make the rare positive comment here at the city of Port Angeles, or any city council or government meeting across the country, which is that I've actually seen a lot of improvement in the permitting times at the planning department and public works. And I would just, for an example, I've been building a lot of very similar projects. And I had a project in 2023 that took 6 months, and that same project with almost the very similar number of documents took 3 weeks. So that's a major, major improvement. So, you know, I had an opportunity at the Builders Roundtable to review the master fee schedule. And I think that is reflective, and those increase in costs are reflective of a lot more quality that we're getting out of, and speed that we're getting out of the planning department. And so, you know, I think that those increases are warranted. And I saw a few areas, for instance, the grading and filling permit, where it's actually going to be more reflective of the real cost by breaking some of the larger, you know, there were some costs in there where it was one cost no matter how big a project is. And that's been broken into two, depending on whether you're in a small or larger project. But also in support of the what's being called now the Super Tuesdays with Tristan. Is that right? The, you know, and there's many things that people can look at over the last 5 years, and they've seen either the price go up or the quality go down, or both. But this is an area of the city's operations that we're seeing, you know, I'm actually seeing prices go down and quality go up, and many people are seeing that similar. So I think that these costs are in line with what we should be expecting, and I think that some people are going to get a benefit out of it even. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. John Ralston is on his way.
John Ralston, City of Port Angeles. I want to second the comments that Steve had as well with regards to interacting with the, I'm still going to call them the planning department. But my comment tonight is going to be in particular I-1, Urban Services Standards and Guidelines. I know it's going to be an informational presentation, but I certainly recognize that nobody on the council is probably dealing with the manual on a regular basis, if at all. And I would encourage Public Works, et cetera, to have a lot of input from people that are dealing with this guideline. And one issue that I have, of course, is some of the stuff can be appealed. I'm sure you can appeal it to the director. If the director doesn't have the same opinion as the applicant, can be appealed to the city manager. I would guess that more often than not, the city manager is going to agree with Public Works. I guess the next step would be Superior Court. Now, I've never gone that far. In fact, I can't remember that I've had any issues like that, but just recently had an issue where Platypus Marine was successful, seems to be successful with decisions that are or results that were contrary to the city's and the city's hearing examiner. So I hope that the city looks at this one issue very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else in council chambers for comments on the first on the agenda items? Oh, James, go ahead.
Yeah, James Taylor, resident of City of Port Angeles. One of the comments I've been making lately is lack of readability with the budget as far as like granularity. And so I want to bring your attention to this bottom of the amended budget. It says general unspecified, and it says $1 million. And yet, if you look at the granularity of, say, customer commitment, he spent $2,500. But yet, we come down to unspecified down at the bottom of the amended budget, and here's $1 million that's unspecified. I really think, you know, as a citizen concerned with spending, that we need more granularity in what we're spending money on. And if you look at all the lines above it, this is far and away over half. You know, it's a large item. It's one out of 28. It's 4% of what this document shows is unspecified. I know I can't get away with that in my own home personal budget, and I really don't understand how the city, and I know you guys are going to just get your rubber stamp out and stamp it. But, you know, this lack of granularity, you know, where did you spend this $1 million? Because it's not, it doesn't say what you spent it on. And so, you know, I think the budget needs to be more explanatory as to how we spend our money. All right. Hey, thanks.
Thank you, James. Anyone else in council chambers for comment on something on tonight's agenda? Okay, then we will go online, and it looks like Sean Coleman. Sean, we will make sure that you are that we can hear you before I start your time.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead when you're ready. I'll start your time.
Sean Coleman, county resident. Sorry, I'm not in person. Just walked in the door from a 36-hour drive from Tulsa. Speaking on item E5, the BMX agreement. First off, I would like to thank the city for the agreement as written previously. The 5-year agreement allows us for longer scheduling outlooks. We're already working on schedules for 26 and 27 and looking farther in the future for bigger events. And also that the agreement stays kind of as written. You guys don't charge us anything, but we don't ask for a lot, but we keep trying to put Port Angeles on the map with all our events and everything else that we do there at the BMX track. So I just wanted to say thank you, and the Parks Department has been an excellent partner in this agreement for the last 8 years. So that's all.
All right. Thank you very much. And congratulations to your riders. They had some good showings at Grants. So, all right. It looks like we have one more comment online. Let me get my timer restarted. And Mimi, when you are unmuted, we'll make sure we can hear you, and then I'll start your timer.
I'm unmuted.
Sure.
Obviously, Mimi Smith Dvorak, city resident. I agree with James. These budget missives that come through they need a lot more information. And we actually really need a citizens oversight committee to look at this stuff, to explain it, because a lot of it is, I don't have 10 hours to go over it. It's not obviously or explainable. It is kind of gobbledygook. I have a real problem with that. I have a real problem with the fact that that budget was so many pages and so incredibly wordy. It was like reading War and Peace. We need things to be simpler, and we need to be more transparent. And absolutely, we need to go back to our roots, which is you're a city, you're a municipal government. You're supposed to be representing the people. It's a local government. You need more transparency. You need more outreach. You need more education for the people. And at the same time, quit trying to pass things that are not in our bailiwick, because that's getting really old. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mimi. I don't have any other hands online. Anyone else in council chambers? Okay, then we will move on to the consent agenda. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent agenda? Anything anyone would like to add? I don't think there's much to add. Okay, then I will go ahead and read the consent agenda. The City Council minutes of November 18th, 2025. Expenditure report from November 8th, 2025 to November 21, 2025 in the amount of $1,744,125.26. 2022 Cultural Resources Services Amendment Number 2, PSA 2022-01. Lauridsen Tumwater Truck Route to L Street Chip Seal Project, CON 2025-06. That's TR 0624, final acceptance. Facility Use Agreement, Lincoln Park BMX, and excusing Councilmember Miller from the November 1st, 18th, and December 2nd meetings. Any comments, questions, or a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Any questions? All right. Anyone opposed to the motion to approve the consent agenda as read, please state your opposition. All right. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Oh yeah, public hearing. All right. We're going to go on to the budget amendment. Let's try that. So for anyone following along, we have a public hearing tonight on the budget, which some of you may be here for. And that needs to start can't start earlier than 6:30. So we're going to rearrange the budget a little bit, and the agenda a little bit, and try to get some other things done. And then we'll start as close to shortly after 6:30 if we're still on something. So Serena, if you can go ahead, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council. So this is the second reading of the third and final amendment to the 2025 budget. This amendment does align the budget with action that's already taken place in the last portion of the year. So it's just taking all those action items from City Council and placing them into the city's budget. There's also a few year-end accounting corrections and changes that are included in there, as well as carrying capital projects that will not be complete in 2025 into the 2026 budget. So we're essentially removing them out of the 2025 budget. A detailed listing of the changes to the 2025 budget is included in your packet on page G3 or page 59 of the PDF if you're following along on the PDF. And so staff is requesting council conduct the second reading of the ordinance amending the 2025 budget for the third time, and that you adopt the ordinance. And I am available for any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from council? Or comments? Or a motion to approve? This is item G1. Lindsay, go ahead.
I move to approve the budget amendment.
Oh, wait a minute. Yep, go ahead.
Second.
Okay, before we do that, let me read the ordinance. An ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, amending the city's 2025 budget for the third time. All right, so we have a motion to adopt the ordinance. Let's try unanimous consent. Anyone opposed to the motion adopting the ordinance for the 2025 budget amendment, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Let's see. Do you think we have time for G2? Okay, let's try it. Go ahead. Serena, are you going to take this one also?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
And so before you tonight are a few year-end accounting cleanup items. They include closing the debt service fund that was used for the infrastructure improvements in the Western Urban Growth Area. And so this is fund number 217 in the city's budget. The debt associated with these improvements has matured, meaning that the debt has been paid in full and it's no longer necessary for us to maintain a fund for this purpose. And so it is recommended for closure at this time. Any remaining funds will be transferred to the electric, water, and wastewater utilities, as well as the general fund, based on the percentage that each fund was paying for in the debt, and that was also established when the debt was created as well. Additionally, staff is recommending the closure of the real estate excise tax, or REIT funds. These are number 105 and number 160, and that's to change these funds from special revenue funds to capital funds. So those will now be funds 320 and 322, and that's in accordance with accounting standards. So all we're really doing is shifting those real estate excise tax funds from 105 and 160 into 320 and 322. All of the funds that exist in those REIT funds will be transferred to the new capital REIT funds, and there will not be a resulting impact to the overall budget or the use of the REIT funds as a result of this change. And so finally, it's also recommended that council conduct the first reading of this ordinance, that you waive the second reading of the ordinance and adopt the ordinance tonight. And that's to align with the 2025 and 2026 budget items that are on the council agenda tonight with these changes. And so I'm available for any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. I will go ahead and read the ordinance. An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, closing Fund number 217, Fund number 105, and Fund number 160, and the creation of Fund number 320 and Fund number 322. Are there any comments or questions from council? Or a motion? Either way.
Move to approve.
Second.
Do you want to include waiving the second reading?
Move to approve and waive the second reading.
Second.
Thank you. Just seems easier. Any questions from council? All right. Well, thank you. This is good news and good to see moving forward and some cleanup. So that's nice. All right. So we have a motion to adopt the ordinance and to waive the second reading and adopt the ordinance. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Let's go to City Action Days. Let's do that. I'm just trying to figure out what's going to take. I think that I want to make sure we have enough time for the other things and we can go over a little bit, but.
Mayor, we could do master fees in approximately 10 minutes if
Okay.
you would like to do that one first.
Sure, let's go for that. Calvin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. You'll find this information starting on page H1 of your packet. The 2025-26 strategic plan was approved by the City Council on October 1st of 2024. Updating the city's master fee schedule for annual cost adjustments and other updates aligns with strategic focus area number 2 regarding timely reviews of over-the-counter permits. I'll now turn the brief presentation over to Shannon.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. This evening, I will provide a brief overview of the recommended updates to the city's 2026 master fee schedule. The presentation will take approximately 6 minutes. To help us stay on track, I respectfully ask that questions be held until the end, as many may be addressed in the upcoming slides. Printed copies of the presentation are available for you at the council dais, and additional copies are provided for the public at the table outside council chambers. Next slide, please. All right. The city's master fee schedule serves as a centralized listing of all fees and charges for city services. Before its adoption, fees were dispersed throughout the Port Angeles Municipal Code. In 2023, Council endorsed 6 new revenue sources, including a full review of fees to align with the cost of service, and directed staff to complete a comprehensive cost of service analysis, or COSA. Next slide, please. In October of 2023, Council received the COSA from FCS Group, which identified a minimum rate of $95.10 for city services. In November 2023, the Council adopted Ordinance 3723, establishing a new citywide fee structure based on that minimum rate and consolidating all fees into a single unified master fee schedule. FCS also recommended making annual fee adjustments moving forward to prevent significant cost fluctuations in future years. Next slide, please. All right, staff did not propose an increase in 2025 because Ordinance 3723 was a significant restructuring and a transition year made sense. Looking ahead, delaying updates into 2026 or beyond would lead to larger increases down the road and would likely require greater general fund support. Next slide, please. These adjustments support the city's ability to maintain service levels while ensuring fees cover the cost of staff time and regulatory review requirements. Next slide, please. So CED continues to strengthen the over-the-counter permit system for simpler permits, as represented in the new reports provided at the second council meeting of each month. We are excited to report that 329 over-the-counter permits have been issued so far. Next slide, please. The over-the-counter program improves customer service and shortens turnaround times for low-complexity work. CED is pleased to report that over 90% of these permits have been issued the same day. Next slide, please. The master fee schedule covers all departmental fees, including those for building, land use, electrical, public works, parks, and fire permitting. Next slide, please. So for 2026, only the hourly rate is proposed to change from $95.10 to $98. More importantly, base fees for building permits remain the same. Additional departmental updates are summarized in the following slides. Next slide, please. For the Parks Department, outdated fees were removed, cemetery fees were updated, and facility rental fees were adjusted with the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, to reflect actual costs. Next slide, please. Public Works added tiered options for stormwater and clearing and grading to reduce costs for small projects. Next slide, please. Other Public Works updates reflect accurate water, sewer, and septic waste costs that haven't been updated in many years. Next slide, please. Community and Economic Development reviewed fees for consistency, cost of service, and worked with the Peninsula Housing Authority to update the fee waiver language to capture more housing projects administered by nonprofit housing partners. Next slide, please. Additionally, CED tiered certificate of occupancy costs for flexibility and standardized fees across departments. Next slide, please. Additional CED updates clarify manufactured home and sign permit fees. Next slide, please. The Finance Department updated utility connection and disconnection fees. Next slide, please. The Fire Department added and updated operational permit fees that address higher risk activities and ensure full code compliant review and inspection. All proposed fees are aligned with current codes. Next slide, please. The Fire Department also updated after-hours inspection options and updated ambulance fees to improve flexibility and equity in service delivery. Next slide, please. Before I begin the slide, I want to note that updated copies of this comparison chart are available in the PowerPoint packet. As you can see, even with the proposed 2026 updates, Port Angeles continues to maintain the lowest permitting fees among nearby jurisdictions for a typical single-family home. Next slide, please. The most important part of this fee update is that multiple departments will review Type 1 permits to determine which can be reclassified as over-the-counter, further simplifying and speeding up permitting. This expansion enhances customer service and reduces processing times for straightforward projects. Next slide, please. These proposed updates include several permit types being considered for addition to the over-the-counter program. For public works, this includes demolition permits, certain right-of-way use permits, side sewer repair permits, and select minor stormwater discharge permits. For CED, the proposed additions include mobile and itinerant vendor permits, as well as minor shoreline and critical area exemptions. And for the fire department, welding and cutting inspections and marine fueling operations are also under review for potential inclusion. Next slide, please. So tonight, staff recommends council adopt the resolution amending the master fee schedule for 2026 and expanding the over-the-counter permit program. Thank you.
All right. Are there comments or questions from council? Go ahead, John.
Well, I'm definitely happy with the changes, and I like the expansion of our over-the-counter program. I think, as Mr. Luxon said, having the speeding up those processes will encourage growth and development when we need it. And so I'm very happy of these adopted changes in the fee schedule. So I will be voting yes on this.
All right. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay. I will just say that I appreciate that we did the pause last year after not looking at fees for a very long time. And that I'm really happy that this has become a routine thing. It's easier to do with the master fee schedule. It's easier for people to look and find what they're looking for. I'm glad that we're moving forward with the expansion of over-the-counter as well. I think it's encouraging to hear from someone who's using our services that they're getting better, and I think that's exactly what we heard from people. And having the fees allows us to has helped in our process of increasing our capacity in order to turn things around faster. So I think this is all good news, and I'm happy to support this evening. All right, do we have a motion? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to pass the resolution amending the city's master fee schedule for annual cost adjustments and relevant updates and expand the city's over-the-counter permit program.
I'll second.
Thank you. And I realized there was a pause because I have a pink tab, which is what I label all my resolutions or ordinances. So I will read the resolution quickly and then we can vote. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, amending in part the City of Port Angeles master fee schedule for annual cost adjustments and other updates and expanding the city's over-the-counter permitting program. Thank you. Sorry about that. Any last comments or questions? Okay, so we have a motion to pass the resolution amending the city's master fee schedule for annual cost adjustments and other updates and expanding the city's over-the-counter permit program. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, the motion passes unanimously. And we're so close. My computer says it's 6:30, so the computer... Right, that clock is slow. So we will go ahead and go back to item F1, which is the public hearing on the budget. So I'm going to turn it over to Serena.
Thank you. So this item is the continuation of the public hearing on the adoption of the 2026 budget, which includes the second reading of the ordinance, and it is also the final step in the budget process. The 2026 budget includes a focus on strengthening the city's financial foundations by concentrating on existing resources and recognizing that current economic trends do not allow additional growth in the budget at this time. Details of the city's budget have been available in the preliminary budget document posted on the city's website since October 10th. There have also been several presentations on both the revenue and expenditures planned in 2026 that have occurred since the budget was posted, including a council work session and multiple public hearings. The 2026 budget is balanced at about $199 million citywide, with about $64 million dedicated to critical one-time capital investments such as transportation and infrastructure enhancements. As a reminder, the city has a few options available to fund these important capital projects when state or federal grants are not available. The first option is to wait until large projects face imminent failure and immediate increases in rates or taxes are required to pay for the project. This would result in significant rate increases that are unpredictable and burdensome to our customers. The second option is to wait until projects are critical and to take out debt, meaning that we would be borrowing funds to pay for those projects. This will come at a higher cost to our community, as interest on the loans would also need to be paid as well. The final option is to plan for capital projects by transferring funds each year into a dedicated savings account that is utilized to pay for these projects as planned in our Capital Facilities Plan, or CFP. These funds are held separately from operational funds and are only used for capital needs. This is the fiscally conservative approach the city utilizes for our capital needs. This approach is also in alignment with the no new debt policy, and it should be celebrated as most financially responsible approach the city can take on behalf of its ratepayers and citizens. And so while financially these transactions are classified by the state as a use of reserves that can only be used by council approval, these are savings that are planned for spending. To be clear, these are not operational funds, and utilizing these funds does not negatively impact the city's budget because they are specifically accumulated to be dedicated to capital needs. This fiscally prudent approach has thankfully led to the early elimination of the mountain of debt in multiple funds. What this means for ratepayers and for taxpayers of the city of Port Angeles is that instead of paying millions of dollars a year in interest payments on loans, our limited resources are instead being devoted to important services such as public safety. It's important to also note that these savings are in addition to the minimum fund balances retained in all of our funds, dedicated for emergencies such as recessions, natural disasters, or other unanticipated emergencies. All of these funds are at or over 23%, and these emergency balances are the financial best practices. At nearly $6 million in general fund emergency reserves, this is likely far higher than many of our neighboring jurisdictions and many jurisdictions across the state. And just comparing this personally, how many of us can say that we have over 23% of our annual salary in a savings account for emergencies? I also want to stress that the city has taken seriously the current economic environment, which is why for the first time in over 4 years, there are no new positions proposed in this budget. Staff has heard the concerns of council and the community and responded accordingly. Finally, there have been 2 changes to the 2026 budget since the first reading of the ordinance. These changes are to remove funding in the amount of $35,000 for Project TR0919 for traffic safety cameras, and that was based on council action at the November 18th meeting. Additionally, accounting changes have occurred to move REIT funds 105 and 160 from special revenue funds to capital funds that are reclassified as funds 320 and 322 in line with those accounting standards that we just discussed. There were no changes to the overall budget that occurred as a result of that reclassification to the REIT funds, and it was simply changes where the funds are accounted for within the budget. And so at this time, staff recommends that council continue the public hearing from the November 18th meeting, that you close the public hearing, conduct the second reading of the ordinance adopting the 2026 budget, and that you adopt the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will go ahead and continue the public hearing, and then once it's closed, we'll have council questions. So is there anyone here this evening who wishes to speak to the budget specifically? If so, feel free to make your way down. All right, I do not have any hands online at this point, but if you are joining us virtually and wish to speak to the budget, this is the public hearing for that. And now would be the time to raise your hand. All right, John, go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. So just going to review, you people probably know what's going on in the economy as a whole, with layoffs with a lot of corporations, struggling at the federal level, the state level, and other governmental levels, agencies, etc. One thing that really sticks out at me is the employee count or full-time equivalents comparing from 2018 to 2026. It's approximately a 50 headcount increase. I realize that 10, 12, 15 people could be involved with the changeover that happened out at the landfill. But it's still a substantial increase. Programs, requirements, et cetera, change that come from the feds to the state, et cetera. I think we need to at least have a plan to get some headcounts under consideration moving forward. Second item I wanted to bring up is I think we've got, there was a pledge of around $3 million for the emergency center, 911 center. I hope we don't spend those funds. If we've got a bid that's between $14.5 and $15.5 million, I think we will have a building that will work, and there's no need to spend any additional money unless we find that there's a problem. Don't spend any more money. Ultimately, it'll have a reflection on the taxes that the city is going to need to move forward. I think I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? James? I still don't have any hands online, so.
Hi, James Taylor, City of Port Angeles. I know, and you guys know, that there's still fat in this budget. And as much as the city's trying to maintain their financial position, a lot of this fat has been generated by city council. You know, little trivial things, such as a tree program. Well, you know, what does that tree program cost? Well, the City Trees USA says you have to spend $40K. And then in council, we spent, you know, I don't know, 20 man hours talking about it. And then we have Scott, he's got to go do work on it. And so these free trees end up costing the city $100 a tree, just a guess. And then there's other things we do. We just keep, you know, every decision that comes from this body needs to say, does it benefit the city's people? Because really, I don't care if it benefits the city or not. It needs to benefit our citizens. And if it doesn't, you need to take out the sharp pencil and cross it out. I see that we're going to send a whole bunch of people to Olympia at, I don't know what's that cost. You know, that's a luxury. And, you know, as we're getting to 2026, which is going to look a lot worse than 2025 on the country's financial scene, I think the AI bubble is going to blow and we're all going to be screaming bloody murder. I really think the city needs to exercise a level of restraint that says, we tried to save the citizens 1%. I'm not asking you to try to save the world, but there should have been a sharper pencil applied, and this body here should have said to this body here, can you go back and save us $3 million? Because you know there's $3 million of fat in this thing. I'm not asking for the world, but the mere statement that this body hasn't asked that body to save a penny is, you know, as a citizen of this community, that's really disheartening. And I don't understand why this body can't ask that body not to spend money. And I can't understand why this body has to take on every great new idea they can think of. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you, James. Anyone else wish to speak to the budget? Okay, then I will close the public hearing and open it up for council discussion. But before I do that, why don't I go ahead and read the ordinance so I don't forget again. An ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, adopting the 2026 budget for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2026. All right, comments, questions from council? Anyone? Lindsay, go ahead.
think if there was one change I could have made while serving on city council, it would be to have us do cost benefit analysis instead of just cost analysis. Because so many of the things we do, yes, we have to spend money to do them, but then we get a benefit that is hard to measure. And I think that's the main reason we don't do it, is it's very hard to say what's the relative value of the Dream Playground? What's the relative value of street trees? What's the relative value of 5-minute or less ambulance response time? What's the relative value of a one-day turnaround at the permit counter? Like, we don't measure those things in the same units. Some people try to like approximate a dollar value to them. But so much of what the city does is about the health, safety, and welfare of our residents, which is not easy to put into the same unit. And I think that's why we don't do cost benefit. And then the other reason we don't is we are like, well, you know, we're estimating, you know, is the value of the Dream Playground, you know, let's auction it off, you know, 500,000. Anyone 500,000? Oh no, like it's not even worth that much. Nobody's raising that. Like, I mean, we're kind of guesstimating, right? But like, we end up with a budget where we're like, wow, these are the costs. And then, you know, my neighbor's like, hey, save us 1%. I'm like, well, that sounds nice. But how do we do that and actually come out with a cost benefit that's in the right direction? Personally, I think that the new positions we've added have increased the benefit way more than their cost. Very concretely, some of those positions are grant writers who have brought in millions of dollars to the city to do these projects that we would have otherwise taxed our residents for that money, or we would have gone without doing the project. And there's costs either way for that. So it's like the saying, you have to spend money to make money. Like, we have to have those grant writing staff able to go out and grab those state or federal or other opportunities in order to not burden our residents with that. So I'm going to defend the increase in full-time equivalent staff at the city, because I think a lot of that has been increasing our capacity to move away from just asking our residents to pay for everything, when we pay a lot of money to federal taxes and state taxes, and we should be able to get some of that back. And unfortunately, it's a competitive grant system. That's another change that we should make, but you know, that's not what we're talking about here today. So, I mean, I think by this stage in the budget process, like us trying to like rearrange deck chairs is kind of like not really fruitful. The budget cycle is a year-round cycle. I think a really good intervention point is in the capital facilities plan, which is usually approved in June. But really thinking of like trying to make a big change right now is hard. It's easier to basically start by saying, what changes do I want to make, and looking ahead. You know, that parks tractor is an example of, like, we had several meetings of discussion about it. You know, what are the things that we as the city are paying for and should be paying for because they provide a public good? You know, like ambulance service. Like, we don't want people dying in their homes. Like, let's provide ambulance that is free and available to everybody who can call 911. Like, that is a public good that I think we should be subsidizing. A big question that we need to ask really whenever proposals come before us is, what is it that is the role of the government public program to subsidize on behalf of the community? And what is it that people should pay for themselves? Or like we ask the private sector, if somebody thinks this is important enough, you do it yourself and see if you can make money doing it. These things that are really universal, that all of us value and need, are really where we focus our effort. Clean drinking water. That's like the basics of what we do as a city, right? Public safety. You know, I would say, you know, universal healthcare, but like we as a city don't have the capacity to make that happen. That's more an issue that we think that we have to solve at probably the federal level. But these things that everybody benefits from are the things that we really should be focusing on as a city. So, you know, I have personal projects where I'm like, I don't know why the city subsidizes that. But I think that's the discussion that we need to have as a community of, when is it a public program and when is it something that people want to take on as their own project? Thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay. Any other council members wish to speak to the budget? Okay. Oh, sorry, Drew, I thought you were raising your hand. Okay, very good. Go ahead.
We get into this a lot, and I mean, I own a business. I'm all about cut costs when necessary. And I do believe in cost benefit analysis, as well as I would argue that a lot of successful business owners and managers recognize that it's not necessarily an easy measurable ROI. So I agree 100% with Lindsay with that. There is a value associated with brand awareness, and you have to have a specialized company to actually give you a number for that. So that is important. But I think what sometimes gets lost in the conversation is the scale of numbers that we're sometimes talking about. And in this case, our citywide budget is set for $199,842,000, so $200 million. The street tree program, if it is 40,000, I don't recall off the top of my head, represents 0.02% of the entire city budget. To put that in the context, the median household income in PA, according to Google, is $5,288. So $10.57. If you make over $5,000 a month and save $10, that pays for the street trees. Now, I'm not actually saying we're charging $10 for street trees for people or taxing or anything like that. That's not the point of that measurement. The point of that measurement is to put it in the context of a personal budget and what the equivalent cost of the street trees would be. So in this case, your MOCA, one MOCA for the entire month, if you make the median income of Port Angeles, is the equivalent of this city supporting the street trees program. And so for the equivalent cost of a MOCA, yes, I support the street tree program. And so I do think it is important for us to pay attention to costs, but I do think it's also important for us to realize what scale we are discussing things in. And $40,000 to a city budget is not the same thing as $40,000 to a personal budget. Those are two very different integers. They're not the same numbers. I myself have to deal with thinking in numbers in terms of at a business level, because I'm not talking in the same numbers as most people's household incomes. I'm definitely not talking in the same numbers as the city's income either. But then I have my personal finances, which is at a much lower scale than either of those two. And then I'm thinking in the city's budget as well, and occasionally state, but I have never gotten to vote on state budget things. So that's not a scale that I have to pay too close attention to. But making sure we're aware of what scale we are discussing things in, and that we are bringing up topics that are important, but also meaningful. And there are times where discussing whether or not if you make $5,300 a month, if you need to save $3 on toothpaste or just buy the $4 one at Rite Aid. I mean, sometimes that's what the municipal equivalent we're discussing is, and whether or not it's necessary saving the proverbial 25 cents by cutting something. So that was just, wow, I was getting ready to say that's my 2 cents, but that was literally not intentional, and it was just a turn of phrase. But that is all I have. In long-winded fashion, I support the budget, the 2026 budget, as we currently have laid out in front of us.
Thank you. Navarro, go ahead.
I think when my colleagues were speaking, something that I was thinking of as well, just to add, is I think there's so much value in planning for the future, and creating a livable community today also means creating a livable community for the future. And I think we've seen, in the 6 years I've been on council, time and time again where we essentially have to make decisions because other councils in the past abdicated their responsibility and said, you know what, a future council can deal with that, and passed the buck to us. And then we're faced with the decision of whether or not we also want to pass that same buck to our, future council members and also future residents. And it's something I'm really proud of that we've done, and I think taken that responsibility and tried to take that very seriously as a council and as a staff of bringing forward items that, and again, like we're talking about street tree program, what a great example of that. A program that doesn't just benefit the residents today, but actually will have a much stronger benefit to the children of Port Angeles, the people who live here in 10 or 20 years, who are going to be the real users of those trees when they're fully grown, right? And, maybe that will be everybody here in the room as well, and maybe it won't. But it will be the future people who live in this town, as well as, again, the people who are living here now, making these decisions that impact all of us. And I think that's a key piece of budgeting, especially when it comes to a municipality, isn't just what are we doing on the day-to-day, but what are the decisions that we're making that are going to affect us, not just in the next year, not just while we're on council, but for our community, because I think that's why we're here. And I think it's something that I think our staff does a really good job of thinking about how our day-to-day impacts affect us and our community members on a long-term basis. And I think sometimes that means dealing with the infrastructure that we have, the problems that we have, and instead of pushing it down the line when we know things are going to be more and more expensive, just dealing with it today. And it's something I think is true in this budget, and I'm sure will be true in future budgets, and is something that I think is worth talking about.
Thank you, Navarro. Hold on one second. John, go ahead.
So in this budget, the first thing I looked at was how it aligned with our strategic plans and capital facilities plan. And this budget does help us budget for real infrastructure needs that need to be happening. I'm not wanting to burden my 7-year-old later for having to pay for these things when they become time critical. So one thing that this budget does that I appreciate is that infrastructure needs getting it paid now before the costs skyrocket. As a math teacher, I know all about exponential growth, and millions of dollars grows really quickly in terms of project costs. The other thing I appreciate is the amount we have done in terms of our debt. While other entities around our county and our state are struggling, they have to submit budgets that have deficits and stuff. We're submitting balanced budgets that we're not, in my opinion, doing anything discretionary. We're freezing hiring, not hiring any extra positions that are not necessary. So I think we're really taking an approach that is, for me, responsible. I like Councilman Straub's comparison to, the numbers and the quantities. When you are talking about budgets at home versus businesses versus municipalities, they're different. And it's important to look at it in terms of the amount of what you're paying for. I try to teach my kids in my classes that all the time, right? The numbers are huge and we have to put them in perspective and to make our context seem clearer and our understanding of where we're going make sense, right? So as someone who thinks balanced budgets are important and balanced budgets are statements of our priorities, I think it does a good job with that. Budgets are hard to read, and so I'd hope in the future, being on the 3 months here, I hope in the future we can work together and make them a little bit more clear, because they are a little messy to read just by the way they are. So I hope to work with the city staff to make that happen so our residents feel a little bit more clear about what's happening. But in my point of view, this budget, I think, aligns to our plans, puts infrastructure first as we need, and our grant-dependent projects are clearly stated. And so that's not something we're asking our taxpayers to pay for, and we're accumulating more debt. So I'm very, what I see, I am okay with. So I appreciate our staff's hard work on this.
Thank you, John. Latricia, no pressure. Just want to check in and see if you want to chime in.
Thanks, Mayor Dexter. I just want to also add on to Councilmember Sherman Warren's comments about capacity. Some of the things too that we've also increased our capacity is our fire and police and code enforcement. I think this is the first time we've had a full fire department staffed fire department, which is one of the things that we've been trying to accomplish to help reduce overtime costs associated with our firemen. The job is stressful. We've also increased our 911 operators. So some of that capacity has addressed the needs of fire safety and life. And our first responders, which even our linemen, if I recall, we were down to one lineman in the city of Port Angeles, and we had to have a contract out for a company to provide those types of services during the wintertime. And we've increased our capacity there. So again, our capacity increases have been strategic and where they have been needed to maintain services to our citizens. But I just want to say thank you again, staff, for your guys' hard work with bringing forth a balanced budget, working through the finer details, and making the recommendations of, again, hiring freeze is not an easy recommendation to make, but it is sometimes necessary. So this budget does have my support tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Latricia. I'll chime in really quickly and then go back to Drew. I don't really have a whole lot to add of what other people have said, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that this budget does a really good job of maintaining our direction with a strategic plan. It reflects that. We've heard a lot about the increase in the number of employees, and yes, we did take over solid waste. That increased employees, but the comments that Councilmember Suggs was making reminded me that we've had a lot of open positions for a long time that we were finally able to fill, and then we did have some capacity increases that we wanted to make, and I think all of those things are reflected in being able to better serve our community. I do think there's a likelihood that we're going to be looking at I don't know exactly what it will look like, but I think it is financial. I think everything's a little uncertain right now, certainly at the federal level and likely at the state level as they try to work to make up some of the losses from the federal level. And so, I'm happy with the budget as it is today. And I think we can continue to be open to conversation about whether we need to be looking at levels of service and be prepared for that. But I think let's get the projects done while we can. And I appreciate being a part of an organization that is setting aside money for capital projects. And I think we had a little conversation at the last meeting about low and no cost loans. And maybe that's something we want to address at a future time, whether that counts as debt, what that would look like. But in the meantime, I think it's really beneficial that we're doing this with the money we have today and not pushing it down the road. So other people are paying for things like the combined sewer overflow project that we're all still paying for. So thank you. And I also will be supporting the budget this evening, and I'll go back to Drew before we move on.
I just wanted to apologize to our resident math teacher. I missed a 0 in my math. So if you compress the city budget to the median income, monthly income of a Port Angeles resident, the street tree program would cost me $1.06. So a bottle of water is what the street tree program would cost me if I made $5,300 a month.
Thank you. I do think one of the things that we heard, just jumping on that really quickly, about the street tree program also is that street trees can increase property values. So I think it is potentially something that benefits individual community members in a way that is really great, and maybe not today, but into the future. So just since we keep talking about street tree program. All right. And I do need a motion. Navarra, go ahead.
I Move to adopt the 2026 budget for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2026.
Second, Lindsay.
Any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion to adopt the budget for the 2026 budget for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2026. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. It is exactly 7 o'clock. Let's take a 5-minute break and come back and talk about refinancing the interfund loans. More budget stuff. I also think it's funny because just really quickly before we go, how many puns are money related? Because everyone kept using them now that we're in like budget mode. So I thought that was fun. All right, we'll be back in 5 minutes. All right. Sorry for that delay. We will go ahead and get started. And I'm going to go back to Director Carrizosa for discussion about refinancing the interfund loans between solid waste and utility water funds.
Mayor and Council, this next item was initially discussed during the rate setting presentation back in October to provide savings to the solid waste utility by combining two interfund loans that exist between the Water Division and the solid waste utility. And this resulted from the transition of the transfer station services into city operations that occurred in 2022. And so savings will be achieved by extending the term of the interfund loan to 8 years. Additionally, this loan will be refinanced in such a way that enough savings will occur in the first 2 years of the loan to allow for the purchase of a compactor baler in the solid waste utility. And that purchase will result in some long-term savings to this fund, estimated at approximately $360,000 annually. And that's through the reduction of transports that will occur by compacting that solid waste. And so refinancing these loans will not result in additional debt, and the savings plan from this restructuring have already been built into the rates that were recently adopted by City Council. And so really just think of this process as similar to refinancing a home loan to take advantage of better rates or equity without increasing the overall amount that you owe on the loan. And so staff is recommending that council pass the resolution authorizing the refinancing of the interfund loans from the water utility fund to the solid waste utility funds. And I'm available for any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. I will read the resolution quickly. A resolution of the City of Port Angeles authorizing refinancing interfund loans from the Water Utility Fund to the Solid Waste Fund. And are there any comments or questions from council? Or a motion? We can go either way.
Move to approve.
I'll do the motion. I move to pass the resolution adopting the refinance of the interfund loans between the Water Utility Fund and the Solid Waste Utility Fund in the amount of $2,400,000.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Okay. Drew, go ahead.
I don't necessarily have a whole lot of discussion. I just think that this is a direct, obvious instance of us saying, hey, city staff, find a way for us to save money to not have to raise rates. And so we found a way by refinancing at better rates to not have to increase our utility rates as much. I mean, that's literally what this is an example of us finding a way to cut costs, in this case, better interest rates, and then literally pass those savings on to our ratepayers. And since we have been discussing budgets so much tonight, I think it's important to call this out specifically as one of the examples of us doing just that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so let's go ahead and vote. We have a motion to pass the resolution approving the refinance of the interfund loans between the Water Utility Fund and the Solid Waste Utility Fund in the amount of $2,400,000. Anyone opposed to the motion, please state your opposition. All right, hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. That brings us to item I1, which is the Urban Services Standards and Guidelines. And I'm going to go to Director Curtin for a presentation.
Madam Mayor, thank you. Good evening, members of council. On page I1 of the packet, you do have a hard copy of the presentation in front of you. I do also have copies at the hall table just outside council chambers for any member of the public that would like a hard copy as well. The presentation tonight's about 18 slides. I am going to go through it pretty quickly, so I'd appreciate holding your questions in discussion to the end. And with that, we'll get started. And I apologize for some of the text. Some of these are better than others, but some of them do get a little small. So my apologies, James. So the Urban Services Standards and Guidelines, commonly known as the USSG, for sewer, water, stormwater, electrical, solid waste, streets and alleys, erosion control, clearing and grading, and construction elements to ensure that city minimum requirements are met and to delineate administrative requirements and documentation associated with the construction of these public and private facilities. These engineering standards are intended to be applied by the Public Works and Utilities Department to ensure consistent review of capital projects, developments, and other activities for compliance with the requirements of the city's urban services standards by the Port Angeles Municipal Code. So these work together. So the city code reigns, it takes priority, and then the standards are how we implement that code. These engineering standards are consistent with City Port Angeles Municipal Code and established state and federal design standards. The USSG considers tens of thousands of pages of local, state, and federal engineering standards, code, and laws, and distills them down into more easily digestible form in less than 300 pages. The USSG does not replace these standards, but summarizes and directs the application of these standards to how they are considered and applied in Port Angeles. These standards are generally considered best practices within the industry to assist municipalities with making consistent and appropriately informed decisions. Let's pause it on me, Bree. Here we go. So some history on the USSG. The city's general urban services were adopted in 1995 by City Council during the same period as the Growth Management Act. Over time, there have been various versions and updates of the urban services standards and guidelines to establish technical details for consistent development standards that are in accordance with Port Angeles Municipal Code and state and federal laws. Examples of some of these changes include changes to ADA accessible curb ramp standards adopted through the United States Access Board or new state requirements for stormwater management. Next slide. So this is a list of a lot of the various standards that go into this. State and federal standards, we have the Washington State Department of Transportation, Washington State Department of Ecology, U.S. Department of Transportation Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. We have the Washington State Chapter of the American Public Works Association Guidelines. We have AASHTO, which is the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, as well as the National Electrical Code, commonly known as the NEC. Next slide. So we're going to go through some of the just what is actually in this book. So this is kind of, we're going to run through the kind of the table of contents of chapter by chapter of what this does for us. So chapter 1 is called General Considerations, and it helps with the definition in terms, summary of permit types, bonding forms that we use, traffic control, traffic impact analysis, developer reimbursable agreements, and then commonly used forms and review checklists to assist staff with the product. Chapter 2 relates to wastewater. It looks at the design of sewer mains and manholes, pipe slopes, design of sewer lift stations and force mains, methods to cross water lines with sewer lines, trench backfill standards, and other engineered standard details. Chapter 3 relates to transportation. It looks at the design of streets and roads, signage, street frontages, design of intersections, driveways, site distance evaluation, street structural surfacing, methods to restore the street after trench installation, sidewalks and curb ramps, street tree list, engineered standard details. Chapter 4 covers water, design of water mains, types of valves, meters, and fittings, water service connection methods and standards, water crossing of sewer, water disinfection standards, as well as other engineered standard details. Chapter 5 covers stormwater. This looks at water quality protection standards, types and categories of permits, summary of minimum requirements and thresholds, stormwater modeling guidance, types of infiltration and detention facilities, manholes and storm main standards, maintenance of private systems, stormwater checklists and applications, and other engineered standard details. Chapter 6, this covers our clearing, grading, filling, and drainage. Details of when permits are required based on our city code. Construction stormwater pollution plan, commonly known as our SWIP, preparation and narratives. types of inspections that are required, as well as applications and worksheets. Chapter 7 covers our solid waste, looks at types of collection, access to containers as examples. Chapter 8 looks at our electric utility. And this discusses required safety clearances from utility equipment, proper trenching depths and utility spacing, available service voltages and metering requirements, customer requirements for meter placement and meter installations. So that's kind of the general of what's in this book. This is obviously, we're very generalizing it here for what's in there. These are the most common things that we encounter in questions being asked. It has already been mentioned about variances. We do get on occasion requests for variances. I can tell you in my time here, just over a year, 3 come to mind. Early on, I had a request for utilizing a master water meter as example. And some developers, this is one of those where one size doesn't necessarily fit all. So we allow some options. So one of the things when I came in here was just clarifying what those options were. So as a utility, water meters are they're expensive. Most utilities like to see a one connection to the main per parcel as a general standard, but there's other factors that come into play. Some owners in tenant situations, they like to have the billing, how it runs through finance for billing might be different. So they might want to have separate meters for that purpose. So the landlord's not having to split up a dozen water bills as example. So we do have some flexibility in that. If an individual wants one meter to go to one building, we can do that. If they request separate meters, I entertain that as well on a case-by-case basis. We have another one here, methods to defer site stabilization. So we obviously run into winter conditions. So on occasion, we do allow variances based on, because like right now, it wouldn't be prudent to do certain site work because you'd be doing more damage than good under rainy or wet conditions. Last one that comes to mind, types of sewer pipe or catch basins. I did get a request to consider altering a stormwater manhole at the Melody Lane apartment project that we had. That is one that I did not accept. I turned it down. They wanted to use a less expensive product, but that less expensive product was going to increase our maintenance costs. So our taxpayers, it was going to increase our taxpayer maintenance costs based on their product. It was going to make it harder for my staff to maintain, to access and clean that structure. So I did not allow that one to go through. We explained that to the applicant. He understood after, being told why we requested the one that we did, and he ultimately ended up installing the one that we asked for. But those are 3 that I have been touched on in my time here. Next slide, please. So exceptions to standards. Exceptions from these standards may be granted upon evidence that such exceptions are in the public interest, that they are based upon sound engineering judgment and the requirements for safety, function, appearance, and maintainability are fully met. Exceptions shall be approved on a case-by-case basis in writing prior to construction. More comprehensive or strict standards may be applied to a specific development in order to provide for the public health and welfare. The standards may be appealed initially to the Director of Public Works and Utilities, myself, and if necessary to the City Manager per Port Angeles Municipal Code 1808-130C. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits of having this? So having this code allows us to have checklists for consistent review. This helps our staff so that when they're looking at things, they're looking at things for the same reasons across applications. So it brings consistency to our reviews and our application process. Public benefits by setting a minimum standard that the taxpayers will be responsible to repair and maintain. Standard expectation to review project proposals, and city administered capital projects remain consistent as staff and consultants often change. So that's important to know. So for all of our projects, we do multiple projects. We do often use different consultants, certainly different contractors when they're being constructed. This makes sure that we're providing consistency across all of our projects, which the city and ultimately taxpayer maintain long-term. Next slide, please. So I have some examples of standard details. These are often shared with applicants, discussed with applicants. We've got a standard sewer service detail, so this just informs private developers, property owners. It gives them a standard detail of what we're looking for how we want them to connect both to sewer and water. Next slide, please. Examples of standard details is another one. We have a road section here. So this just kind of generally shows a typical road standard for us. This shows, sections within our right of way, curb and gutter, what the widths are, depths of backfill, things like that. And then sidewalks have been a hot topic here recently. So these are some standard details that we use for assisting with designing and implementing sidewalk standards. Next slide, we have examples of checklists and worksheets. So these are what staff use as communication tools, working with the developers and the public. These are things that we go through to, and there's training that's associated with this with staff because it's not all the same person all the time. But it's a way of double checking, did I miss anything when I get to the end of an application? And it's a useful tool for us to ensure that consistency. And last slide is simply questions. I would like to add, here recently we've had the sidewalk fee in lieu changes. So our goal here in the coming months with some changes from the comprehensive plan, sidewalk fee in lieu, other things, we're going to go through this and make sure if there's any blatant contradictions just with the age of the project, we're going to work to clear those up, to remove those. As I said, city code is really what reigns. The standards here, they don't really show like it's not one thing per application, right? They're pretty varied. They have choices. So if you find yourself in this situation, this is an appropriate best practice to use. But oftentimes we find ourselves where you're in a situation where 3 or 4 of these apply. So you pick the most appropriate when doing that. So for example, if you're looking at a sidewalk, depending on where you're at in town, that sidewalk might be on back of curb. It might be 5 feet off of curb. It might be on a corner lot. It might have a crosswalk. It might not. There's a lot of variability into these things. So they trigger multiple things. But we will be looking at cleaning up any of the blatant things that might be misleading that no longer apply within the current USSG. And then additionally, my other recommendation to council will be, and we're kind of already doing this right now. I mean, certainly this past year, I think the Builders Roundtable has been quite successful. You have seen the fruits of that multiple times now. Everything here most recently, we just went over, Steve, in fact, talked tonight about the master fee schedule. We went over that at the last meeting. Sidewalk fee in lieu has been a topic for the 2 meetings prior to that. And just other common topics with the permitting and application. I see this as no different. I see this as just another logical next step in that process, working with the building community on anything in this that comes up. So we can certainly, I don't feel like I have a lot of problems here because I haven't been approached telling me that this is not working for me or this is problematic. I think the few that have come to my attention, we work to clarify and work towards successful solutions. So I don't feel like there's a massive need to gut this thing and start over. I don't see the current need for that. But with that said, happy to open it up for discussion and answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Council, are there questions? Go ahead, Lindsay. Oh, sorry. Go.
I just had one question. How often, I may not know this right now, but how often are there exceptions that are asked for and granted to builders?
So it's not, we're not asked very often. I can tell you, like, to my level, now it might be discussed more at the engineer level, but stuff that rises to my level in the last 12 months, probably 4 times has someone come to my level and asked me to look further into that. Generally speaking, when the question gets raised and the engineers respond with the why do we want this or why do we need this? Generally speaking, the developer goes, I didn't realize that, or I didn't think of that. And that generally answers the question and they generally move on. If we found ourselves in a situation where, let's say a particular product was not available, it was back ordered, or it was going to take an extensive period of time, we would entertain alternatives for that, but we're still going to want it to meet the general specification. So we oftentimes will work with applicants on items like that, as example.
Thank you. Lindsay, go ahead.
So I think my first experience with this was when my next door neighbors and I were looking at building a fence on the property line, which we had surveyed. And, good fences make good neighbors. So we're like, oh, yeah, well, what's the tallest fence we can do, And I do what any, new lawyer learns to do, which is you look at the law and read the law. And our municipal code section on fences actually even has illustrations and drawings in it. It's really useful. And it says, I'm getting a nod from John. Thank you. I forget exactly what it says, but it's basically like solid fence up to this height in the back. And then you can have like 25% perforation. And by the way, lattice meets that requirement up to height. And I'm like, let's go for like the 6 feet plus the 2 feet of lattice. Like, seems great. Well, my neighbors do what past property owners who moved to a new jurisdiction do, which is they called the city. And they get an answer that was different than what I saw in the municipal code. They learned that anything over 6 feet requires engineering. And so we decided not to do the 2 feet of lattice on top of the 6 foot fence as allowed by the municipal code, because there was this additional rule that I didn't know about by reading the law. And I thought that was kind of absurd, because I believe in the rule of law. I think people should be able to read the law and know what it says. And if we want a city where every time somebody wants to do something on their property, they have to call the city to get the full answer, like, that's really complicated. That doesn't seem like an efficient system. I would much prefer a system where you could open the municipal code, you could, open the manual. Hey, you live in Port Angeles, own property in Port Angeles, here's the user manual. Open it up to the fence section and you know what to do, right? Like, how do you fix your flat tire in your car? Like, this is how you get the spare off the bottom or out of the back. Like, you know how to do it all, right? And we don't have that system. Instead, Scott gets a call. And, so for everyone who lives in Port Angeles, there's like, you just do it yourself method. And, don't ask, don't tell. We had a lot of people with the Airbnb tell us, oh yeah, I just didn't call the city to check because I knew what they were going to say. Then you have people who are, sophisticated actors, right? The developers we're talking about in a lot of this work who, work in Port Angeles over and over again and have learned the system. And then we have people who show up at the city planning desk and are like, how do we build a fence in our backyard? I think what we have now probably works for some people, but where am I going with that? To me, it's overly confusing and hard to understand where you go to find the entirety of the law in the city. So just from that legibility perspective, I think it could be fixed. I then also have issues around the process by which these rules come about. We as a city council in the municipal code have authorized the staff to basically create these things, create this urban service standards and guidelines, right? This massive document that people learn about when they show up at the permit counter. And we have created an appeal process. Okay, great. So there's some due process. The appeal process is talk to that staff person's boss, and that guy, you can appeal up to that person's boss, right? So you can go to Scott, you can go to Nathan, and that's it. Unless you want to go to court and fight the city. The problem with fighting the city is, like if you're a developer trying to make things work in Port Angeles, you've now bitten the hand that feeds you, and you don't want to do that, right? Like you want to have an easy permit counter experience, not be the person who's like, oh no, here they come. Like they sued us last month and they won, so now let's get them, right? Like we don't do that, but like that's how people feel about this process. So it concerns me that there's nothing like the Administrative Procedures Act here. There's nothing about like the staff have to promulgate new rule revisions. We didn't even get notice of it if you wanted to. Like there's no requirement that this is shared out in any kind of like update to the community, opportunity for comment. Like this is just a staff created document that is law in the city because we've authorized it. So there's a procedural issue here too. And then there's like the consistency issue. So this exceptions slide that we looked at, exceptions from these standards may be granted upon evidence. Okay, so we can lower the standard. But then bullet 3 says more comprehensive or strict standards may be applied. Okay, so we can raise the standard. So you come to the city, we're like, here's our rules, but we can change the rules. We can make them worse. We can make them lighter, and like, that's not fair. That's not the principle that like everyone is treated the same when they go to the government and say, I want to do this thing. So like, we have no standards. We have very little appeal. There's no appeal outside of the staff. It's all in the executive. We don't even know about these changes. I'm not trying to undermine the system of, experts like engineers being able to set standards. That makes sense, right? That's the whole basis of administrative law since the 1930s, which of course, is kind of out of style in 2025, but I think it's worth saving. But like, part of me says, where are the guardrails? Where is the accountability to the legislative branch of government in the city, which is the city council? Where is the public input? Where is the transparency on changes? None of that is in this code. So, I've thought about, let's just strike that section of code that authorizes this and basically like make the staff put these rules into our rule book, which is the municipal code. I have like 1.1 meetings left. So obviously like that's not going to happen, right? On my watch. But, you all can do what you want. I do think, Director Curtin and others are aware of some of these issues. Like, thank you for bringing this up. Thank you for preparing the presentation. I hope that there's more effort to, as we think about the comprehensive plan, comprehensive code, what am I trying to say? The municipal code comprehensive rewrite, that like, while we want to shorten the length of the municipal code, I do also think that removing tentacles was one of our goals, by which we meant not octopus, but, like references to other documents. So like, why have multiple documents when we have, 8 pages of stormwater in the municipal code and 80 pages of stormwater in the urban services standard? Yeah, that, makes the code shorter, but it also creates this whole separate document that people need to find. And then like, how are we incorporating the 1,200 pages of Western Washington Phase 2 stormwater? Like, where does that even live? So that's probably like a third layer that the user has to like comb through. And, that's fine from a legal analysis perspective, but like, do we really expect everybody in Port Angeles who's doing something on their property to understand that? The answer is no. So then everybody calls the city and we wonder why we can't get things done quickly because everybody's calling the city to figure out what they can do. That's my rant off my soapbox. Thanks.
Mayor, may I respond?
Yes, go ahead.
Before we move on. So great questions. And even the fence one, I really appreciate bringing the fence one up because it brings up a good point. So these standards and guidelines, as I mentioned, they're actually summarized from a variety of different products, okay? One of the other things that we have adopted within the code is our variety of building codes. We touched on the NEC, but we also have the IBC, the IRC. These are the codes that Shannon and her group do separately as part of their plan review. The fencing one that you brought up, when you exceed that 6 foot, that's actually something that is a requirement of the building code. It's not specific to Public Works specifically. It's not necessarily even something that would be specific within this USSG. It's something that's detailed under another code requirement that triggers the engineering. And that's kind of common with all these things. This product, and this is why, again, I go back, and don't laugh, but when they say they bring this down to the 300 pages, this is taking many manuals and consolidating it for that very reason, because we know the average person is not going to read 2,000 pages of code books and all of these other standards. It's meant to provide faster access to kind of the highlights that if I'm doing this, I can look at how does the city like their sidewalks done. I don't necessarily have to look at, 10 other volumes of a variety of things. It's not perfect and it's not going to capture every instance, but that's actually the goal of this, is to actually consolidate some of that information into a somewhat more manageable product. It was brought up and mentioned earlier, about platypus. Platypus was another perfect example. When you're looking at the building codes, there's contradictions within the building codes. When you look at NEC, NFPA, IBC, they're not all perfect because they can't foresee every situation that the code's going to come through. So that's why you still have folks like Shannon, like myself, the engineering team. They have to look at that for what it is, evaluate it, and understand what's the most appropriate practice for what they're trying to do. And that's what this is, a tool that helps us do this. The benefit of this, the large benefit of this, is that this is actually intended to save taxpayers in the long run. It's to prevent undue burden from being placed on the residents because we didn't require something when we should have required it. I give an example. Let's say your block you didn't have a sewer main and you wanted to extend a sewer down your street, and you're the second house from the corner, and you say, I want to go and extend that sewer, but I only want to put it in 4 feet deep because it's cheaper for me to only have to dig 4 feet deep. But the problem is that your house is now the end of that sewer run. Whereas if it went 8 feet deep, I could run 400 more feet and pick up maybe 20 more houses. Is it going to cost more money to lower that pipe? Yes, it is. But is that in the best interest of the public good? Yeah, yes, it is. Otherwise, every single person would have to run their own separate main into our collector system, which we don't do that. Now, is that apples to apples across the city? No, it's not. We have to have staff look at that, understand, where we are in the city, what the depths are, and understand what those requirements are. And then we use this as a tool to make the best informed decisions that we can, working with those developers. That's just one example. We do this across 100 different items. Are we perfect all the time? No, absolutely not. We're not. You mentioned, again, the platypus one. Maybe we got it right. Maybe we got it wrong. It's a complex thing. These are a lot of these are very complex issues. But again, when we're making these decisions, our goal is to protect the taxpayer as much as possible, which is also protecting our budgets. We know I'm on the hook for the long-term maintenance of these things, and I don't want to accept something that is going to cost more money than every other one installed across the city. It's just not. I don't look at that as that's not appropriate for my role at the city. So that is the intent. Does that answer most of your question? Thank you. Happy to answer any others.
So I'm thinking back to the fence example, and I understand Lindsay's point of we have this municipal code that says one thing, but there is this engineering piece that has to happen. And so maybe this is a really dumb question, but I'm thinking while the goal was to reduce tentacles, where there is code behind our code, maybe we just need to say that in the code, in our code, in the municipal code. Fences above 6 feet require engineering, please call the city, right? Speak to engineering. Because you wouldn't know that. And so you choose the easier route, let's just build the 6 feet, but maybe you really want the 8 feet. So I just wonder if there's some places where, because my understanding, which I think you've said, so I'm gonna restate it, is this is basically in theory, best practice compilation of all of the codes that apply to things that happen in the city. from all the areas that you talked about in your slides. So they're not things that we can ignore. We can't ignore the International Building Code. So maybe we just need to do a better job of articulating in our code where there may be a tentacle that here's a path you need to follow, and here's the link so that you can get to it. Anyway, I'm certainly not going to do anything about that tonight, but it's just what I'm thinking about in hearing what you're talking about and what you're saying is there a better way for us to communicate in the code, which is in theory where people will go if they're not going to just call the city, so that people understand and don't get themselves in trouble by just doing I read the code and it said I could do this. So
if I may,
yes,
just to add to that's a very good, valid point. And I think we absolutely can do some of that. So like this fence example, that's an easy one. We can actually do that. What my only caution would be is, the intent of this is to make this where it's still a manageable document, where it's of value to people, right? So we don't want this to go from 300 to 900 pages, which is just adding another 600 pages of information that people are likely not going to see. But any of those instances that you guys get feedback on, regardless of what it is, it could be a fence, it could be signage, it could be whatever the case may be, we can look at that. The challenge for staff is going to be Calvin's group in particular, the codes get updated about every 3 years. We don't always adopt them every 3, but there's a new code that gets brought every 3 years across the IBC, IRC, NFPA, NEC. Those are all generally updated on 3-year cycles, and then we adopt them, as that comes to council as time allows and they recommend. So there's some management long-term involved in that, right? So when that code, for example, there was likely a code that did not trigger engineering on an 8-foot tall fence. That was something that was added to the building code. The building code is commonly referred to as the code is written in blood. So there's a reason why it became code. Something likely happened they decided to add it to a code because of an incident that happened somewhere across America. And then it ended up becoming part of code. That's generally how those things come in to pass. There is some ability on certain items that council, you can exempt certain things from code. So if you found something that was just not appropriate or doesn't fit for Port Angeles, we have the ability to potentially do that. But again, the caution on that is as you go through, you don't want to have this massive book of exemptions. It just makes it harder for staff to manage, and you end up creating this more complicated situation than you're already in. I fully intend to continue to work with the Builders Roundtable. I think it's been very effective. Calvin's team, my team, those folks, I feel like that has been working well. Council has been seeing the fruits of that, probably quarterly coming back. I think this would be another great one to peruse. And if you guys have additional input, I would love to, put it up, and we'd likely, I want to speak for Calvin, but perhaps on a quarterly basis, we could look at what's involved in that and what comes up. But it's a living document. This is not something that it's a cast in stone and we forget about it. I mean, this is something that will get modified over time, and we're happy to do that. So.
Great. I will just make one quick clarification that because we're talking about all these codes, my thought was where this is relevant to items in our municipal code, that we may want to add some language in our municipal code saying that there may be, this is the standard, because we can't change it all the time. But so people know if it's up to X, do whatever you want. Beyond that, you may need to have some conversation with the city where this comes into play. We don't have to say it that way. I don't know what it would say, but just that better information, short of dumping it all into the municipal code. Just a thought about a way to move forward at some point in the future. Anyone else? Okay, well, let's move on then to 2026 legislative priorities right around the corner, legislative session. Nathan, go ahead.
So Mayor and Council, each year, City Council establishes legislative priorities that are utilized at the state and federal level relative to priority issues for the city of Port Angeles. And with this short legislative session, we want to keep that list for the minimum to a minimum for 2026. Staff have put some preliminary items on a list for consideration this year, including non-regressive tax reform, including support of the Lower Elwha Clallam Tribe Sewer Project, including protection of the Department of Natural Resources Elwha Watershed state legislation that was passed last year, as well as solid waste compactor opportunities that ensure we get further assistance in creating some efficiencies relative to the transportation of our solid waste. In addition to what you see in the memo here, we've incorporated the Association of Washington Cities legislative priorities. And we are hoping that council tonight takes the time to go around to each council member and provide some input on what you all would like to see relative to our legislative priorities in 2026. So Mayor, if you can go around the room, I think that would be an ideal approach.
I sure can. Can I get some clarification really quickly beforehand? So you said state, and I want to make sure that because it's a little bit different. The third bullet point under staff recommendations is protection of the Department of Natural Resources Elwha Watershed. The memo says study legislation, and you said state legislation. I just want to get some clarification so I make sure I'm heading in the right direction.
Thank you, and perhaps I misspoke, but both are accurate. This was state legislation passed last year, and it is legislation that in our discussions with Department of Natural Resources, there's value to ensuring that that legislation continues to be protected.
Okay, thank you. All right, who wants to go first? Should just go around. Navarra, go ahead.
I'm happy to go first. I'm very supportive of continuing to advocate for a non-regressive tax reform. And I really support all of the things on here. Additionally, I'm very supportive of the sewer project. I think we've talked in years past about trying to support tangible projects that are happening here in the city. And I think that's a great example of that. I'm happy to support that. I also think that I think it's great that we're able to continue to advocate for safe and sustainable drinking water and be able to study the effects of, well, really anything on the Elwha watershed. And I think that it's important for us to continue to push that advocacy and legislation forward. I am interested to hear more about the solid waste compactor opportunities. And then I think in years past, I'm very supporting AWC's priorities as well. And I know that they talk about housing there. And I think, Lindsay usually brings this up, but I think supporting the Low Income Housing Alliance's legislative priorities is important as well. And so I would ask that we support those. But I think that somewhere on this, we should call out housing very specifically. I think everybody knows it's a problem. The state has to know it's a problem. And I think there's just value in saying that, we all know that we have a housing crisis. So I think it's worth saying that somewhere on there. Additionally, I think there's some other projects in our community that I'm feeling nervous about saying out loud before getting express permission to do so. But I know that there are other nonprofits in our community that have had conversations with our state legislators, and believe that they have some projects that might be moving forward as well. And I think that they are likely, the people I've heard from are folks that I think have projects that we would be supportive of and that I think align with our goals and values here at the city. And so I think if those come up or when we know about them, I think being able to be flexible to talk about those additional issues, particularly at the next, I think what we're talking about next, but at City Action Days and when we're talking to folks at the state, I think it's going to be helpful to be able to advocate on those additional items that might be valuable, might be tangible to the community members here in Port Angeles that we want to support. But other than that, and I'm not sure that they need to go on our one pager, but just to say that it might be something that we can, those other issues, if they do come up, or if community members bring up those other tangible items to us, that might be in the state budget, that we can advocate for those. Oh, I do also want to say, it feels a little awkward to be looking at the AWC legislative priorities, particularly around indigent defense, because that is the job I have, so working in indigent defense. And so I did just sort of want to like recognize that. I'm clearly very supportive of that. I did read AWC's fact sheet about what they're advocating for. And I think I just sort of want to make clear that I think in advocating for that, I don't think that there's a conflict of interest there or any kind of like monetary benefit, but I just feel like it wouldn't be right to not say something about that.
Thank you, Navarro. Who would like to go next? Okay, John.
So looking at this list of things, I definitely am supportive of non-regressive tax form, as I stated in our last city council meeting. I feel like any time we can shift the tax burden from our residents to people who the wealthiest people in the state or companies that can afford their fair share, I think that's important. It won't only help our taxpayers, but helps other entities around our community too. Schools, a hospital, whatnot, and we know they all need funding too. Definitely supportive of the sewer project. I think it's important to bring utilities out there so we can develop and bring in any projects we can. The solid waste compactor opportunities, that's one I'm supportive of. Any way we can find assistance with transportation costs, which are skyrocketing, and help our solid waste stabilize and again shift the burden away from our residents paying utility rates and taxes on it would be great. Also, the AWC priorities, transportation. We're always having things here we want to accomplish in terms of roads, safe traffic safety measures, accessibility for semi trucks coming to town without disrupting our downtown. Housing, again, crisis everywhere. It needs to be addressed. So those are the ones I would be hoping to support and see on a priority list in the future.
Thank you, John. Latricia, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Dexter. Sorry. I agree with the things that we have on here, but one thing that as we were sitting here listening to Scott about our prior conversation, and also housing supply, housing costs, maybe one of the things we can work with, because he had mentioned that like the building codes get updated every 3 years. And I can't remember when we last approved the last ones, but I knew during COVID, one of the things that the state legislature did do is allow for delay of adopting some of those building codes that would help to, usually changes result in increased costs and stuff when you have code changes. And I'm wondering if there's anything that we can do at the state legislature to advocate to re-examine building codes that would make building more affordable in the meantime, or at least delay some codes that are maybe coming down the pipe. I mean, I don't know which ones are going to be coming down, but I think that's something outside of the box. I mean, it doesn't really cost our state legislatures anything except for re-examining potential changes that might be coming in the future. Or maybe we can make suggestions on, hey, these are things in our area that they just don't make sense. And it would allow us to build in our community more affordable housing, but yet still meet certain standards associated with, trying to meet greenhouse gas reduction impacts in our community. So I guess I'm suggesting to staff, is that something that we can consider? It doesn't cost anything. It would be easy to do, or at least delay building codes. The other thing, and Kate, maybe you can help me if this is even needed. Do we need to push our state legislatures to create and to continue our promoting our relationship with Canada, between Washington State and Canada at the state level? I mean, we're not getting any favors at the federal level when it comes to our relationship with Canada, but yet we are dependent and reliant on our neighbors in Canada, and we want to continue to maintain that relationship. So again, that doesn't cost anything for our state legislature. Is there something there that we can work with our state legislatures to strengthen that relationship with Canada? So those are my two suggestions that I'd like to add, because they don't bring any costs associated with it.
Thank you, Latricia. I will answer your question about the Canadian stuff when it's my turn, and I made a note so I don't forget. Drew or Lindsay?
I don't see any specific reason not to support both the staff's recommendation, non-regressive tax reform, sewer project, LO watershed study, solid waste compactor. Really looking forward to the solid waste compactor if we can get state funding for that. Not only does that take the burden off us to pay for it, but that's another example of us finding a way to be able to save money for our ratepayers. And then AWC always has a good list of priorities for us. It's sad to think that these haven't changed in I don't know how long, which means that we have not been successful in lobbying for state changes. But they are important. It is nice to see, transportation and housing supply has been on there since probably the beginning of time, but the indigent defense and the shared revenues, I think, is new for this year. And that's good to see. After the presentation we had from our county prosecutor, I believe, thank you, about the new burden on our legal system because of the changes. I do think pushing for that and getting assistance for that is important. So at this point, I don't see any, if we listed everything that would be a legislative priority, it would no longer be a one sheet, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a one sheet. So in the spirit of having something that's easily digestible, I don't have any specific additional suggestions other than what we already have.
Thank you, Drew. Lindsay?
I guess I'm telling stories since I'm almost done as a council member. When I first joined council along with Kate, I was like, we are the legislative branch of the city. Like, let's work on the municipal code. And there was all this emphasis of like working on state advocacy and even federal advocacy, which I was like, why are we doing that when we're the only ones who can touch our own municipal code? But I really come to see how much our role is, privileged spokespeople for our community. Having been elected, other elected officials no, hey, the same constituency that elected you also elects me, and I'm going to listen to what you have to say. So there's a lot of value in us using our privilege as council members to advocate for what we need as the city for the health, safety, and welfare of our residents. So I like this short list. I do appreciate that we continue to put adequate non-regressive tax structure at the top of our agenda, because that is the elephant in the room for our state. Just quick stat, the poorest 20% of households in our state pay about 17% of their income in taxes. The wealthiest 1 to 5% or so pay about 3 to 4% of their income in taxes. So we're not even like flat tax. We are a regressive tax state. We were the most regressive, meaning that the people with the least ability to pay the most, and the people with the most ability to pay the least. We were the most regressive until about 2021 or so, when the legislature passed the Working Families Tax Credit and the capital gains tax, and that put us number 49. We beat out Florida. But Jeff Bezos did not move to Florida for that reason. He moved there because his fiance lives there. Now he can launch her into space. So like there's more work to do there. And while the legislature like is in what's considered a short session, they're all up for election. Everyone's afraid of taxes. Taxing millionaires and billionaires is popular in Washington state, and the legislature is considering some options to do that. And obviously in a really regressive tax system, that's where we find the funds for the programs that people need. Most of the state budget goes to education, goes to human services, goes to university education. Like these are things that we need. Everyone needs to have an opportunity to thrive in our economy. So I like this list of specific projects. I agree with Councilmember Schwab. Let's not, make the list everything, because then it's basically nothing. We are in a special position of communicating to Steve Theringer, probably in his last year as capital budget chair for the House. So that's, maybe he'll go out with a bang for his district. We can certainly suggest some projects. But overall, it's a bad budget year. So that's the reality of it. Personally, I think we should only include here things that the legislature can take action on in legislative session. So while there's a lot of things we'd love to talk to our lawmakers about, as AWC teaches us, advocacy is a year-round job. If it's not about legislative session, let's save it for when they're out stumping and door knocking, and hey, let's come to City Hall and see this thing we're working on. As far as state building code stuff, there's a whole lot there. I did notice, looking at upcoming meetings, this Friday, 10:30, the Senate Housing Committee has a report on the State Building Code Council. So that's live Friday at 10:30, but it's also recorded on TPW. I think for us, our role is to focus on the things that matter for the city of Port Angeles specifically, that nobody else is going to advocate for. And then I like supporting AWC, and I like supporting the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. Part of the benefit, just mechanically for us, is if we put this in our agenda, then we can testify on behalf of the city of Port Angeles. If it's not in our agenda, we can testify as individual council members, and that still carries some weight. But it carries even more weight if it's hey, the city council of Port Angeles unanimously adopted this priority. Lawmakers notice that. When it is a priority that, we don't have a lobbyist, we're not changing our priorities during session. So if we do AWC's priorities and the Housing Alliance's priorities, we also can adapt as we go, because we're basically saying, hey, we trust these organizations to continue to advocate for our interests on these particular issues. So that, I think, allows us to be more, to use our positions more as the session goes on. There are sometimes conflicts between AWC's priorities and the Housing Alliance's priorities. Carl at AWC is we're, usually 90-95% aligned. So I think it's great for us to continue to support both of those. What I've done in the past, if I'm testifying on a bill where Housing Alliance says yes, AWC says no, or vice versa, is then I don't speak on behalf of the city of Port Angeles, because that conflict to me just cancels out the fact that we've taken both of those endorsement lists. So that's how I've handled this the last few years. And I think we're on a great track and using our weight as a city to help our community and others around the state. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay. I will agree with everyone that I appreciate the proposed items by staff. And I would agree with Navarra. There are some projects, one in particular that I'm aware of that I did not have a chance to check in, but have mentioned if there is going to be particularly a capital ask. But in general, if we want to support it, and I don't have that permission yet, so I will get it and then I'll mention it to staff. We can add it when we bring it back. And I'm wondering, one idea I wonder about is we have the one pager, and I don't remember if we've done this before, but I feel like we have. So we have the one pager, which is our top items, and then usually like a little thing on the side where there might be we're supporting these other people's asks. And that's where we include AWC and Low Income Housing Alliance. And I think in the past, we've also addressed some of what might be some of these other items that have come up, so that we have agreed that we're supporting them. We're not necessarily prioritizing them on the one pager, but if an opportunity comes up to advocate for them, we can do that. And so I'm thinking there might be, particularly because we want to be very mindful of budget implication asks, but I think having some additional items that we approve but maybe don't put on the list, so that we can talk about them, might be helpful. So I will address quickly. I was going to use my council report for this, but I'll just use it now because I think it's relevant and I'll be short about it. 2 weeks ago, I was in a Zoom meeting, and we're going to meet again in January. Maybe I mentioned it already. I can't remember when it happened, if we did council report since then. It was co-hosted by MP Gord Johns and our Congresswoman Emily Randall, and Congressman Rick Larson also joined. Steve Theringer was on the call. Cantwell and Murray had staff in the meeting. And it was a number of mayors, tribal representatives from Vancouver Island, some coastal mainland, and then Blaine, Ferndale, Whatcom County Commissioner was there. I was there. And we just kind of talked about what the focus was really on tariffs, but like what have been what are we all dealing with? And perhaps unsurprisingly, the Vancouver Island tourist destinations are reporting huge increases in tourism, where the I-5 corridor border cities are noticing significant loss of income and revenue. People are used to come and do their school shopping and things like that, and they're not. So there's some ongoing conversation about that. And the issue that I raised in that meeting specifically was, and again, I have not had a chance to talk to Coho people specifically, but I have concerns knowing what we know about the loss of southbound traffic. Not exclusive loss, like it's still happening, but not in the way that it was. That at the federal level, I think there's some acknowledgement that is a hugely critical, not just because we love it, but also because it's a huge economic impact, that the Coho stays healthy financially during this time. And so that's the only thing I can think of that might be specifically, and again, I think that would be a money issue, but maybe we put something about that relationship on a page that isn't on our one pager, but would be something we could all talk about if we had the opportunity. And I am hoping to go back to Victoria in December to meet with the mayor again and talk about how things are going. And so I think locally, I think we're doing a good job of maintaining that relationship, but I do think we're going to continue to see specific people, organizations, and governments hit pretty hard by how things are going. So I don't disagree with having something about it. I don't know that I would spend time talking to our legislators about it unless there is a specific ask that we hear about. But otherwise, I think just having some talking points would be probably useful. All right. Anyone else? Do you have any questions, Nathan?
Mayor and Council, I don't have any questions, but Mayor, as you mentioned, there's a lot of creative ways we can identify those items that are important to us, but not necessarily on our priority list. And we've done that in a variety of ways, but I think there's some easy ways to do it. There's some, examples that we've done in the past on those items, including it's been everything from Field Hall to Rainier to Ennis Creek Restoration. Those are some of the things that either we've put in a minimized way on the one pager, or we've in some cases done a second tier of priorities. But we'll play with that and we'll have some ideas brought back to you in January on that.
All right, that sounds great. I would like a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and finish up with city action days, council reports, and second public comment period. So we'll be back in 5. All right. Thank you all very much. City action days. Nathan.
So Mayor and Council, this year, City Action Days is occurring a little bit earlier than usual, and it's scheduled for January 21st through January 22nd. And for that reason, we wanted to go ahead and give Council the opportunity to discuss which Council representatives would attend City Action Days. So Council, we are requesting that Council put forward 3 individuals for consideration to attend City Action Days. We have proceeded to reserve 3 hotel rooms for council members, as well as registered 3 positions at the AWC conference for that purpose. So council, if you don't mind, go ahead and provide some appointees to attend.
All right. Well, I will say that generally it's the mayor, but that's when there's a little more time because we already know who the mayor is and it's all done and decided. So I guess at this point, I would suggest that we just be mindful about a mix of returning and new and go from there. So are there people interested? John, go ahead, Navarra. Oh, you're interested. Okay. And Navarra, did you raise your hand? You're interested?
No, I'd like to
speak. Okay, very good.
I think that we should table this until we have the full complement of new council members on this board. I think, as Mayor Dexter mentioned, we also have mayor and deputy mayor elections. And I think that there is a lot of value in having either one of those positions attend. I think that, as Kate spoke to earlier, or I think actually Lindsay spoke to it earlier, being able to use the weight of a council member, and I think in this particular area as well, the weight of mayor or deputy mayor, I think it's one of the rare occasions where those titles actually mean something. And I think that I think that when we're considering who should go, I think that all of those things matter. In addition to what I think is mentioned here, which is that I think there's also a lot of value in making sure that the people who didn't attend or aren't attending, one thing in the spring are, there's a balance of who's attending which events throughout the year. And particularly with 2 new council members, I think that field gets a little wider.
Thank you. Drew, go ahead.
I'd pretty much just to echo that. I think it would be prudent, especially because Amy's also not here tonight, to hold off on figuring out who's going to go to action days. And then also, I just want to confirm that going to action days will probably make it so you don't get to go to the annual meeting. I personally I've attended both over the last 2 years, and I personally got way more out of the annual meeting. And so if I get to choose one or the other, I would like to go to the annual meeting in lieu of the action days. Okay. However, I'll totally go to both if there's not enough people, because I do enjoy attending meetings.
Okay. So do you know, Nathan, is there enough time if we put this on the agenda for the first meeting of January? Would that be okay?
Mayor, I think there's plenty of time. I think the priority would be for those council members interested in going, have a placeholder on your calendar. And then if we make that selection in January, it'll be just fine. Again, we have booked those, we have booked a sufficient number of hotel rooms as well as enough registration places that we should be good to go.
Okay, very good. Then unless there's any objection, we will move that item to the first meeting of January. All right, very good. Then we'll go to council reports. Latricia, we'll start with you.
I attended Clown County Marine Resources Committee meeting. I missed the William Shore Memorial Pool meeting. I was not feeling good. Got sick last Tuesday, so I was not able to attend that event. I'm just going through my calendar real quick. Please bear with me. Talked about the MRC. Yeah, other than that, I did attend the tree lighting ceremony. Good job putting that together. It was great to see the kids running around the tree, and ran into a former preschool teacher of my oldest daughter, Zelby. So it was great running into people downtown, and my daughter's 20. So that was probably about 17 years ago. She was my daughter's preschool teacher. So it's small world. That's all I really have to add to this. And I'm feeling better, but not quite 100% yet. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm glad we have the hybrid option so you could still join us, and hope you'll recover quickly, or fully, or both. I should say both, fully and quickly. John, we'll go to you.
I haven't attended many meetings. The last utility advisory committee got canceled. But since our last meeting, I went to the teddy bear tea with my family, and I've always heard about it, but I've never been there. And my wife bought tickets, so we went, and what a great event. I saw a lot of my students in my classrooms volunteering to dress up like different characters from Disney movies, like princesses and like Prince Charming, and my daughter thought it was so cool. And so I'm glad our city sponsors that event and allows them to use our facilities to hold that. It was gorgeous in there. So I thanks to the Parks Department for making that happen year after year. Moving forward, next week we have our next utility advisory committee, so I'll be part of that. And yeah, just can't wait for winter break.
All right. Navarra, go ahead.
Well, I attended the William Shore Memorial Pool Board meeting, not a hearing, a meeting. And I think maybe it's worth giving council some updates there. I expect that maybe a few of you have read about what's been happening in the papers. We have placed Steve Burke, the executive director, on administrative leave, paid administrative leave. And I think just so everybody knows, his title had been director, really, I think, serving as like the operations director, sort of HR manager, a lot of those kinds of jobs. We have, as of not the last meeting, but the October meeting, appointed him as the interim executive director. And Ryan's really stepped up. I think that, as I think many people said, pool commissioner said during our last meeting that, our priorities are really keeping the pool open and functioning. It's a huge community resource, very important, I think, not just to the people of Port Angeles, and not even just to Clallam County, but the peninsula as a whole. And I mean, it's really a state-of-the-art facility. So many of the decisions that we took at our last meeting are really to help keep those facilities open and running as smoothly as they ever have been. And to that end, we've really been looking at some updated financial policies and looking at ways that we can improve those per some audit recommendations. And some of those include, at the same time in October, that we placed Steve on paid leave. Our treasurer at the time also he requested to go on leave. He has a family emergency. And so sort of with this change, we're looking at some additional checks and balances and procedures. So Commissioner Johnson is going to be bringing back a job description for the treasurer role, and in the hopes of sort of going out to hire for that. Per some RCWs. We've also been in contact with the county around looking at what those delegation of duties look like between the county treasurer department and our appointed treasurer. And then also in the interim between now and then to make sure that those sort of fiscal responsibility elements are still being done. Both Ryan has implemented some, I think, valuable changes around checks and balances, while also we've also unanimously appointed Commissioner Mike French, as sort of an interim check and balance to review the financial statements and other sort of like credit card statements and all of that before each board meeting, so that those responsibilities are still being taken care of while we work on a more global and comprehensive procedure. I think that's mostly my update.
Thank you, Navarro. Lindsay.
Well, other fun news. So I attended the county's homelessness task force meeting this afternoon, sitting in for our official rep, Councilmember Amy Miller. And I think the highlight to share here is kind of just the impact of a HUD announcement last month, that HUD is shifting about 2/3 of its continuum of care funding away from permanent supportive housing and rental assistance to transitional housing and short-term interventions. So, they're kind of breaking down, there's estimates of like nationwide, like 170,000 people will lose housing because of this decision. It's a little unclear and hard to plan. I think here we're talking somewhere, 50 to 100 people might lose their housing because of this decision. There is a lawsuit by municipalities and housing organizations. So no preliminary injunction yet, but seems likely. In the meantime, Serenity House, OLICAP are looking at what do we do? Not surprisingly, the Trump regime is not giving clear guidance because confusion is part of the strategy. So, it's unclear exactly how to respond for our local housing providers. But, it's something to anticipate. How do we adapt when people with severe disabilities who are not able to live on their own lose their housing? And that's going to be a greater impact on our police, on our fire, on our hospital. So a lot more impact if we don't go upstream. I think a lot of the research is permanent supportive housing is one of the most cost-effective housing interventions we can do. It far and away saves the cost of, a night in jail, a night in the ER. Sharon was even, running some of the numbers in her head for the operations at Serenity House. And it seems like their permanent supportive housing is like about $8,000 a year. A night in the shelter is $26 a night, and run that out over a year, that's over $9,000. That's about $9,500. So it's even cheaper to do permanent supportive housing than a night-by-night shelter, and the quality of housing is so much better because shelter is in housing, and you're in a congregate facility, with a lot of problems. So permanent supportive housing is, really the best practice. And for the Trump regime to say we're going to shift to transitional housing and short-term interventions is really incredibly cruel. And, it will have an impact in our community. So we need to just be ready for people to understand why and how this is happening. Thanks.
Thank you, Lindsay. Drew.
So I don't backtrack. Could you remind me when the last time we actually had council reports was?
first meeting of November.
Okay, so anything after that one, I'll go over real fast. Going way back, I was able to attend the Veterans Day event at the high school auditorium. I and another council member was able to attend. I have had a Port Angeles chamber meeting as well since then. I did get to go to Wander Fuca and meet with them and talk a little bit about their upcoming plans for the city marketing. And so I'm excited to be able to hear more about that and see what they put together. And then moving forward over the next couple of weeks, I do have a Olympic Peninsula Tourism Commission this upcoming Thursday. And actually, most people don't have anything scheduled for December. So I have a chamber meeting, which I'm sure I'm going to have to go to the ice rink for at some point, and Olympic Peninsula Tourism Commission, and that's about it.
All right. I'll be brief. I represented Port Angeles at the Victoria Remembrance Day ceremony on our Veterans Day. And for those who don't know, we buy a wreath. They have a whole ceremony where we lay the wreaths on the monument for the war. And I think especially meaningful to participate this year to reinforce our friendship and the importance of our relationship with them. And then it's always fun to get texts. Hey, I was at the ceremony and I heard your name. And let's see, what else do I want to mention? Well, I already talked about the meeting about Canada. It was nice to hear. It's nice to have federal engagement on the Canadian side as well. And I was impressed by the level of participation. And so I'm encouraged that group will be meaningful. And potentially we talked about how we might be able to expand it out. And, before I don't remember if it was before COVID or when, but I know that our chamber has taken a delegation over to meet with their chamber. And so I think there are already some existing relationships there. And I think there's some discussion about having a group like that with chamber representatives from a number of cities to talk about things. And I think if nothing else, it's helping to maintain the relationship despite what's going on and reinforce that it really is valuable economically and just because we like each other too, but particularly economically. And so hopefully we'll have more of that. And I think I will just stop there. And we'll go to Nathan and then public comment.
So Mayor and Council, a few updates for you this evening. On one update relative to some of our federal grants, the court did agree to add the city of Port Angeles and others to the complaint relative to King County versus Turner. Additionally, Council, I wanted to share that some of the success of our last legislative priority list was to see over $2 million awarded towards the housing pilot project, and let you know that this week we did finally receive a draft contract from the State Department of Commerce to actually see and receive that funding and put it to use on that project. So we do anticipate in the next couple of council meetings, we hope to be bringing that grant agreement forward to council for approval. And then finally, I just want to say thank you to the great work to our finance team, especially Serena and Haley, for their hard work on the budget. And council, thank you for your approval of that document this evening. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Well, that brings us to our second public comment period. So if you are online and wish to speak at this public comment period, please raise your virtual hand. We'll start in council chambers, and we have, I think, 2 comments in council chambers. But we have at least one. And go ahead.
City of Port Angeles. John usually jumps up first, so I'm not used to being the first one standing here. I'm trying to figure out, so on the comprehensive plan, we started that project back, I believe, in October of last year. So we went through multiple meetings. And, talked verbiage, wrote letters. And so then last city council meeting, my friend and neighbor came up with this revised language that said free prior consent. And I'm really trying to figure out what that means and what the economic ramifications of it are. So let's suppose Scott needs to put a water tower up by the Fairmont. And now, rather than go through city process, the way I understand this, he has to have consent in order to build this water tower. And then, so what does consent documentation look like? Because, you know, I could come up and say, well, I consented with Calvin that we're going to go out for coffee, but it very easily could be I didn't mean it. So, you know, am I going to have a legal contract with Calvin to go have coffee in order for this agreement to actually come to fruition? I can't see a process that says consent has to be documented. There can't be a process where that consent isn't documented. So now let's suppose we have three things all happen at the same time, and the other consenting party only has one person, that person's on vacation. And so now these projects that already take us forever, you know, we had what, 11 million, 12 million that didn't get done last year that's going into 2026 in projects. Well, this is going to add a month to a process. You know, what does consent mean? Do they have to sit there and agree to the engineering documents? Does consent mean, is it a handshake? Yeah, go ahead. What does, you know, this language is very incomplete, and it seems like it's a huge, another step, another burden. I don't think if I want to put a fence up in my yard, I have to get consent from anybody but the city. Or, you know, what the heck does this language mean? And then plus, why was it inserted after the comprehensive plan procedure circus juggling act? Why was it inserted only after that process was complete? Thank you.
Thank you, James. Anyone else in council chambers? Okay, we'll go online. We'll start with Donna Peterson. Donna, when you're unmuted, we'll make sure we can hear you, and then I will start your timer.
Is that okay?
Yes, I can hear you. So go ahead.
Okay. My name is Donna Peterson, and I am a city resident. I'd like to ask the council a couple of questions for clarification purposes. I know this is not a time when you can actually answer me, so I'm formally asking you to please respond to the email that I sent you earlier this evening. At the July 15th council meeting, I asked about the preliminary report findings concerning the City of Port Angeles' management of the senior center that was submitted by Jetta Rogers on April 23rd of this year. My understanding is that Ms. Rogers' work has concluded and the final report was submitted on October 31st. I have included the final report in the attachment to the email. I would like to know if you as council members have read this report and where things stand regarding implementation of her recommendations. What assurances do we have that all the effort that went into this report is being addressed and not just sitting in the back of a drawer or a filing cabinet somewhere in City Hall? As I asked in July, what happens next and what kind of timeline can we expect? I am very concerned because myself and many of my friends first brought the issue of problems at the senior center to the council's attention at the June 4th, 2024 council meeting. We begged you to deal with the issues quickly with simple apologies and corrections to policies. It's now 18 months later, and while I'm still waiting for one of you to address this publicly, it has come to my attention that as of a result of this inaction, a lawsuit alleging civil rights violations has now been filed in federal court. Can we for a minute just imagine if in November of 2023, during the Muffingate fiasco, that instead of stonewalling and bullying senior citizens, the Parks Director would have said, "You're right, Mr. Martin, there is no clear policy about outside food at the senior center. Let's work on developing one together." Imagine the goodwill that would have fostered, not to mention the buy-in or ownership of said policy by the members of the senior center. There would have been no trespassing of Mr. Martin, no trespassing of Miss Elan when she tried to renew Mr. Martin's membership, then no retaliation to the members of the Round Table on Politics when they spoke on Miss Elan's behalf, and finally, no expensive lawsuit. It is incredibly frustrating that despite so many requests to head this off and fix the problem, the city of Port Angeles has chosen to circle the wagons, protect the good old boy network, and waste taxpayers' money. I am eagerly waiting your response to my email. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. We'll go next to Susie Blake. And Susie, I'm ready when we know we can hear you.
Hello.
Hello. Go ahead, Susie.
Hey, thank you. Susie Blake, Port Angeles resident. Thanks everyone for being there so late. I had to come home and eat my dinner after a long day, so I was there for a while, but I left. I didn't want to sit there and eat while people were talking and presenting. That would be rude. Anyway, since the last meeting, I've taken some time. I really appreciate all the people that show up and comment. I learned so much from them, whether I agree.
Susie, we can't hear you right now.
Almost 60 myself. I would like to encourage the under 50 set to come forward and comment more, and maybe ways some of us can help them is like offering to make a meal or babysit the kids for them so that they can have some time to be more active in these meetings. So if you're on staff or you're in the audience and you know someone younger in the community that's just struggling to build their life here, please maybe do what you can to help them be able to come participate in more of these meetings. I've been trying to talk to some people out in public and learning a lot from them. And I'm going to leave it at that tonight. It's been a long night. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. All right. I don't see any other hands online. So go ahead quickly.
Yeah, clarification. One of the speakers mentioned a lawsuit against the city because we're the senior center. If that's the case, that speaker also asked us to respond to their email. I just want to confirm that they're not a party to the lawsuit, and we can confirm.
I have no reason to believe that the individual providing public comment is a party to that lawsuit. Certainly in the documents that I read, they were not party to that lawsuit, and we'll be happy to provide an update on the great progress that Jetta Rogers made relative to the Senior Center.
All right. Thank you very much. I don't have any other hands. So we are adjourned, and we will see you all at the next meeting, which I think is the 16th of December. I should confirm that before I say it. Yes, the 16th of December. Thank you all. Have a good night.